Baruch Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Chullin Daf Nun Zayin, Chullin 57, but we will start on the bottom of 56b at at the two dots around 9 lines from the bottom that we had said that if the B'nai Me'eha, if the internal organs of the chicken had fallen out, it's still going to be kosher. I mean, if they popped out. So says Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Shano El Shal Hipach B'hem. That's only the case if when he put them back, he didn't reverse them. But if he inverted them, then we're going to say it's a treifa. Hashem made you and he formed you. Hashem made it with bases, meaning to say everything was done in the right order. If one of the foundations of our body is reversed, we can't live. Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir taught who aslav echoneneka. What does that mean? Kracha dekula bay. That the Bnei Israel is like a city, which is a metropolis that has everything inside of it. Mimeno Kohana, Mimeno Neviah, Mimeno Sarah, Mimeno Malacha. We have the Kohanim, we have the princes, we have the kings, we have everything. We have the prophets. As it states, Mimenu Parna, Mimeno Yosei. So this is a pasuk from Zechariah, which prophesied about this idea that in the future, about Beis Yehuda, that they will have kings and princes and warriors, and they won't have to bring anything from another place. They'll be self-sufficient. Ahu Roma, there was a Roman, the Chazyahu Gavra. He saw a man, the Nafal Me'igro Ara. He saw a man fall off the roof, Achman al-Islan, Paka Karse, Benafak Maine. So his belly opened up, and some of the intestines were protruding. So Asya Lebre. So the Roman brought the son of that man, the Shachta Kameh, and he slaughtered him. He didn't actually slaughter him, as the Gemara very quickly clarifies. B'achiza Sainayim, using Achiza Sainayim means he used an optical illusion. So he made it look like he was slaughtering his son. And then at that point, Ingid. And then at that point, the man, when he thought his son was being killed, he sighed. So the Isnach, he at that moment he sighed and he groaned, and then at that point what happened was because he was groaning and sighing, so his intestines jumped back in, and he as a consequence he stitched up the belly. So nishtabu raglav, if the chicken's legs broke, then we're going to say the Mishnah says it's kosher. So says the Gemara, Utsana din kuri. There was basically a basket full of chickens with broken legs. You know, these were on the discounted chickens. The asil kami de Rava. So they brought them to Rava. So badka Rava b'tzoma sagidin. So at the bottom of the leg of the chicken, there's a lot of tendons that interface with each other, interconnect, and so therefore he checked it. So masakidin. Rashi says there are 16 tendons that are down there, and this is at the bottom of the thigh bone, next to the joint. So basically, back to our Gemara, so Rava checked this Tzoma Tagidin, and since they were intact, Achshere, he said that it's a sign that it's not a treifa. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav Shmutas Yaveh, if the forearm of the animal was dislodged, it's Kshera, Shmutas Yerach Behema, but if the thigh of the animal was dislodged, that means it's treifa, Shmutas Yerach Ba'ov, if the thigh of the chicken was dislodged. I'm just looking at the picture here. Okay, if the thigh of the chicken was dislodged, here we have. Anyway, if the thigh of the chicken was dislodged, treifa, shmutas gafbov. But if the bone of the wing was dislodged, both treifa. Why? Chashina and shema nikva. We have to be concerned that maybe the lung was punctured. Ushmuel Amar Shmuel says, under those circumstances, tibadek, you could check the lung. Chen Amar Rabbi Yochanan, tibadek, check the lung. Chizkiya Amar Ein Re'el. Chizkiya says, there's no lungs for a bird. A bird has no lungs. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yeshlo, it does have lungs. Yeshna ka'ola shalvered bein agapayim, and it's the lungs are like a rose petal between the wings. Ma'yin re'alof. What does Chizkiah mean when he says there's no lungs? Ilema delays like klal. If you want to say it means there's no lungs at all. We see for ourselves that there are lungs. So maybe it means that the lungs, if there's a problem with the lungs, it doesn't make a treifa. It can't be that. But we've already had this statement 2 or 3 times already in this chapter. The Levi taught those treifos that the rabbis counted them by an animal, that they listed them, connect them ba'of. They are the same exact things by a bird, except for yes or an oaf. The bird has an extra treifa. That if the skull breaks, even though the membrane on the head is not punctured, it's still going to be treifa. Ella, so what does it mean when Chizkiah says there's no lungs? It must mean, says the Gemara, that if the bird falls, we don't have to check the lungs under those circumstances. We don't have a chashash. And also, if it went in a fire, we don't have a concern about the lungs. My time, why? Because there's a lot of ribs and they protect the lungs. The Gemara says it can't be that that's the reading of the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan says there are lungs. And they're like a rose petal between the wings. Because the Chizkiah suffered the Leisley. Must be that Chizkiah says there are no lungs at all. Oh, and here's an astonishing statement. From the words of the Baribi, Rashi said in several places in Shas, it means the Gadol Ador. Sometimes it refers to an actual name, but here we know his name is Chizkiah. So from the position of Baribi, we read, from the fact that Chizkiah said there are no lungs, Nikar Sheino Baki B'Tanagolan. We see from here that he was not an expert in chickens. Chizkiah was a big tzaddik and he was a tremendous Torah knowledge, but he had a weakness in chickens. Rashi says, why? He didn't eat chickens. Therefore, he didn't know if they had a lung. But then Rashi says, it was, this is kind of like a joke. They're like joking here when they say he wasn't an expert in chicken. They were joking. They're saying, oh, because you don't eat chickens, you made a mistake here. So we have this statement of Rav, which pay attention to because it's going to be very heavily discussed. That Rav Huna says in the name of Rav Shmutas Yerach Ba'of, that if the thigh of the bird was dislodged, of the chicken was dislodged, it's kshera. Rav Bar Rav Huna. So Rav Huna's son says to Rav Huna, "V'harabanan dasumi pumpadisa," but the rabbis came from Pumpadisa, and Amar Rav Yehuda, and there Mishmei de Rav, and there they quoted that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, the Rav Amar Shmutas Yachbov Treifa. You're saying that if the thigh bone of the bird was dislodged, it's kshera, but Rav Yehuda quoted Rav as saying it's Treifa. So what do we do about this? Amar Lei, so Rav Huna says to his son, Bari, my son, Nahara Nara Upashte Azim. Every river flows differently. Both rivers don't flow the same. And so therefore, the way Rashi explains it is, Rav told me it was Treifa. Rav told me it was Kshera, but then when he went to Pumpadisa and he saw that they were holding that it was Treifa, he didn't correct them. Or maybe they asked him and he said, follow this place, it's Treifa. But in general, Rav really held that it's Kshera, but everybody has their own minhag. Naro Pashte Azil. Rav Abba Ashchel, Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, the Kapadik B'Tzomas Agidan. So Rabbi Abba found Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, his son, that he was checking the Tzomos Agidin to see if they were intact. Amar Lei, so he said to him, why do you need to check this? Rabbi Abba said to his son, Rav Yirmiyah, why do you need to check all the space where all the tendons connect? But didn't we say that the Shmutas Yerach, that the dislodging of the thigh is kosher? And Rashi explains why this is a question. Rashi says the thigh is completely removed, and for sure, if the tendons on their own are removed, it's for sure kosher. If even the thigh is removed, then for sure, if just some of the tendons that lead to the thigh are removed, it should be kosher. So why are you bothering to check the tendons? Amarle. So Rav Yirmiyah Barabba responds, Anamas Nisan Yadana. I know a Mishnah. And what's this Mishnah? We're going to get to that, God willing, that I am Bob. And the Mishnah stated, Be'ema shenechtechu raglea min arkuba u'amata kshera, min arkuba u'mala psula. Let's say there's an animal that its leg was cut off from the joint below, it's kosher, but above the joint, it's disqualified. B'chein shenitel tzumas agidin. And also, if the Tzomas Agidin are removed, it's disqualified. But Amar Rav Allah, v'chein ba'of. And Rav said there also that if the Tzomas Agidin was removed, it's a treifa. So that's why I'm checking it. Yeah. If the thigh was dislodged, it's kshera. But I have a mission that says if the tendons are dislodged, Rav says it's treifa if the tendons are removed. So ihachi kasha the Rav Adarav. So we have a contradiction. So ishtik. So Rav Yirmiyah Barabba was quiet. Amrullah said maybe v'dilma shani ben shmuta chatucha. Maybe there's a distinction between this shmuta, which is dislodged, and chatucha, which is cut. Meaning to say, by shmuta it's kosher, even if it was entirely removed. But by chatucha, it's treifa, even just the tendons. If it was cut, even just the tendons, it's going to be psula. Maybe that's a distinction. Amrullah. So Rabbi Abba said to his son, "Va'at mefaresha shmaita de Rav." You think you're explaining the teaching of Rav? But Feirasham Rav. Rav said this explicitly. Now remember, he says shmuta kshera chatucha psua. He says if it's dislodged, it's kosher. If it's cut, it's disqualified. Va'al tisman, don't be shocked. Sharei chotcha mikanu mesa, chotcha mikanu v'chayosa. Sometimes you cut in one place it dies, the other place it lives. Kisal Rabbi Abba askcho Rabbi Zera. So when Rabbi Abba went. Kisok Rabbi Abba, when Rabbi Abba went to from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. So Kisok Rabbi Abba, when Rabbi Abba went from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, Ashke Rabbi Zera Diyasav V'Kamar. So he found Rabbi Zera in Eretz Yisrael. Remember, before Rabbi Zera made Aliyah, he had a high. Then he moved up to Israel, but he found Rabbi Zera that he was saying, Amar Afunim Rav Shmutas Yarachbov Treifa, that if it was dislodged, it's Treifa. So that was not like Rabbi Abba had said at the beginning. At the beginning, remember of our teaching, we said that Rav Huna said in the name of Rav Shmutas Yarachbov is Kshera, and here he's saying it's Treifa in the name of Rav Huna. So Amalei Chai Demar. So Rabbi Abba said, I swear, from the day you went up to here, the day you went to Eretz Yisrael, it happened to us that we would speak to Rav Huna about this exact halacha, about Shmutas Yarach, and we asked him, Shmutas Yarach both Kshera. You're saying he says it's Treifa, but we asked him, he said it's Kshera. And in fact, and he repeats this whole incident, we found Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba, that he was sitting there and he was discussing the Tzomos Agidin and the Kabbadik and the Ikshile. Why are you checking him? Lo several Amar, Adam Ravunim Marav Shvut Ziyar Pov Cher. Amoy Anam Asizi Adam Beim Mishan Aftor Aglam and our Kubul Matuk Cher and our Kubul Malap Tzul V'chein Shenitot Tzomos Agidin. Amar Rav Allah V'chein V'ov V'amri Lo Yachi Kacha the Rav the Rav Ishtik Ikshile Dilma Shani Le Rav Ben Shvuto Chatucha V'amri V'amri Am Farash Shmat the Rav Ferish Am Rav Shvuto Cher Chatucha Psula V'abiyotcha. Say why are you saying it's treifa? We had this explicit discussion that Rav Huna said in the name of Rav that it is kashera if the thigh of the chicken is dislodged. So Amar Rav Chia, Hachi Amar Rav Chia Bar Ashi Amar Rav Shmuta Yerach Ba'of is treifa. So the Gemara says, nevertheless, we say Rabbi Zera said, I had a teaching. Okay, you're saying that you heard it from Rav Huna in the name of Rav, but I have a teaching that Rav Chia Bar Ashi said in the name of Rav Shmutas Yerach Ba'of treifa, that it's not kosher. Rav Yaakov Bar Yidi Amar Rav Yochanan Shmutas Yerach Ba'of treifa. And also Rav Yochanan says that the thigh was dislodged straight. But Amar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi Omoy Ave Rabbi Yochanan Ba'asra the Orobo Chavrusa Le'Tera, and about that he says that we have a following teaching. He said, if Rabbi Yochanan were ever in the place where they said that the Shmutas Ha'of was allowed, well, Pirchas, he didn't flinch. He didn't flinch, meaning to say he didn't get upset. Because he knows that Rabbi used to say it was ksher, even though Rabbi Yochanan said it was treifa. If anybody else said it was ksher, he didn't say anything. The Tarnagolas Aisalo Rabbi Chanina, and in fact, Rabbi Chanina once had a hen. That its thigh was dislodged. Rabbi. They brought it for Rebbe. They tira. Well, and Rebbe allowed it. Umocha Rebbe Chanina. In fact, Rebbe Chanina used to preserve it with salt. So we know that they used to eat it. Rebbe said that you could eat such a chicken. And so even though Rabbi Yochanan said it's treifa, we know that he didn't flinch if somebody ruled it was kshira. And the Gemara concludes the law is not like all these teachings. But the halacha is like the following. We had the following circumstance that Rabbi Yossi ben Orai once asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, "Kederas kana b'kama? What's the size of a hole in a trachea that'll disqualify the animal?" Armo Mishnah Shlema Shaninu. This is an explicit teaching in a Mishnah. Ad Kisar Italki. If the trachea has a hole the size of an Italian coin, it's disqualified. Amar lo. So Rabbi Yossi ben Orai said to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, "V'alo Rachel achas aita b'shkunasa." We once had a lamb in our neighborhood, and niktar kana shala, that it had a hole in it. Also a krumen shalkana, and they took another piece of a kana. They did a surgery. The chayasa, and the animal was able to live. So why do you say it's treifa? Amalo v'adat samech. Rabbi Shimon Levi responds, "You're relying on that." And this is why this is a proof. He says it's a widespread law. Shmutas yerach b'ov treifa, that if the thigh was dislodged in a bird, it's going to be treifa. So it's halacha ravechas like Rabbi Yochanan. The halacha ravechas like Rabbi Zera. The halacha ravechas that if the thigh was dislodged, it is treifa. The Tarnagolas Aisel Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, and then we continue with what Rabbi Shimon ben Levi saying. And one time Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta had a hen. Shenishmata yerach shala, and its thigh was dislodged. But also shalkana, and he made like a splint to keep it strong. The chayase lived. So even though we have a widespread law that it's treifa, which is the point of this story, nevertheless we saw it lived. So how do you explain that? You must say that how to come it lived, talking based Chodeshava, because it was within 12 months. So basically, within 12 months, these items could live, either the rachel, the lamb that had a hole in its trachea, or the thigh that was dislodged. But that doesn't mean it's not a treifa. And so therefore, the upshot of the Gemara concludes, even though we have different opinions, the Gemara concludes that it's halacha ravechas b'Yisrael. It's a widespread halacha that if there is a dislodging of the thigh bone of the chicken, nevertheless the chicken is treifa. It's treifa under those circumstances. Even though Rabbi himself used to serve it. But now because we had this mention of Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, he made a splint for a chicken that dislodged thigh bone. So now we're going to see that Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta himself he used to experiment with animals to determine exactly if they could live under certain circumstances. He was an experimenter. And he actually wanted to prove that Rabbi Yehuda was not correct, so he didn't experiment. We learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said if the notza, these are the down feathers, the feathers right next to the skin, the small feathers right next to the skin of the goose, that if those were removed, it's disqualified. Rabbi Shimon took a hen, and its feathers were removed. So he put it in a warm place. He put it in an oven, which was warm. And he took the blanket that the copper makers would use when making their copper, which was always warmer. And so basically he made the chicken warm. And it grew better, basically better wings than the first time. It grew better feathers. So we see from here that Rabbi Shimon Chalafta did this experiment to prove Rabbi Yehuda was wrong. So the Gemara says, what kind of proof is this? Dilma Kasav Rabbi Yehuda Treifa Mishabachas. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda says that even though it's a treifa, it can still improve. No, the Gemara says no. Im came but the mitrafa ba higdila kinafayim achronim yoser rishonim. Fine, I understand that maybe it could get better, but not in the very area where it was weak. But the mitrafa ba in that exact problem, it wouldn't improve. It could improve in other areas. So my ask him how do we know that Rabbi Shimon Chalafta was this person who experimented, even though we've already seen two experiments. One, he worked on the chicken, which had a dislocated thigh, and he also worked on the chicken that lost its feathers. But now we see the source of all this. Amar Mashar Shedachsiv, it says that Shlomo Melech said in Mishlei, Leich El Nemoa, Shlomo Melech said, go to the ant, Atzel, you lazy one, go to the ant. See its ways and become smart. There are 3 times many ants as human beings, and Asher Engla Kutsin Shoter Moshel, and yet they don't have an officer, they don't have a president, they don't have a general, and yet they somehow manage to survive. So go look at them and follow how their society works. So what did Rabbi Shimon Chalafta? He took Shlomo Melech literally. It says, go to the ant, you lazy one. He says, I'm going to go. Tachin b'kayetz l'chama. So basically, or the pasuk says, the pasuk continues, prepare. So he says that about the ant, it prepares for this for the summer in the heat, and then it eats in the harvest in the winter. But so Rabbi Shimon Chalafta said, Amar Ezil Echse Ivada Yehuda Eisel Malka. He says, I'm going to see if it's really correct when Shlomo Melech says there is no king, there's no ruler for the I'm going to see if this is correct, that there's no king for the ants. So he went in the summer. Pars de Laguime, Akina de Shumshim. And so he stuck his coat over their nest, which was in the sun. And the ants don't like the heat. They stay away from the sun. They only come out in the shade. So now he made it look like it was shady. So Nafak Asa Chaminaya, one of the ants went out. Asnach be Simona. So then Reb Shimon Chalafta made a mark on it to demonstrate that this was the ant that he was keeping his eye on. When this ant went back in, Amaru Nafal Tula. He said, look, everybody come and follow me. It's shady outside. Nafku va'asu. So they went out and Daya Laglima. But by that point, he had removed his coat. So now it was sunny. Nafal Shimsha. So now it was all sunny. Nafku alei v'katli. So all the other ants ganged up and they killed this ant. Amar Shma Mina Leislu Malka. So Rav Shimon Chalafta says, I see from here that they obviously, Shlomo Melech is correct. They have no king. The Islu are Mana de Malka, because if they had a king, they would have had to ask permission. They should have had to ask permission before they killed him. What kind of proof is this? Maybe the king was with them. Maybe they already had a standing permission. Maybe it was a transition period. It was in between kings. In between kings, they could do whatever they want. Don't give me your scientific proofs. Don't give me your experiments. Rely upon Shlomo HaMelech's evidence. Anyway, so the Gemara continues. The Gemara says, Amrafuna, similar treifa, you're basically a sign for a treifa is that the animal can't live 12 months. But if it lives 12 months, that's an indication that it's not a treifa. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, we have a contradiction. Similar treifa, kol she'ena yoledes. One sign of a treifa is if it can't give birth. Rishpa Gomar, Mishabechas v'olechas. Rav Shpak says it can improve. Biyadua shuk share. If it improves, we know that it's not a treifa. Misnamna v'olechas. If it gets weaker, biyadua she treifa. Then we know it's a treifa. So one sign is that it can't give birth. Another sign is if it gets weaker. Rabbi Omer similar treifa shloshim yom. Rabbi says if it lives 30 days, it's not a treifa. Amar lo v'lo harbe miskayim amos shtayim shlosh shanim. So they responded to Rabbi, but aren't there many animals that are treifas that live even 2 or 3 years? So the Gemara says it's ultimately a tanai. It's machukas tanaim from the Brayso the Tanya uvegogolas, where we say about a skull of a person that if he's dead, the dead body transmits tumah in the tent. But if it's a skull that has a hole in it, then at a certain point it's not considered a skull anymore. It doesn't transmit tumah in that tent. If it has one hole that's long, if it's the size of a drill, then it no longer transmits tumah. There was an incident in Inbul that he opened up he had a hole in his skull. And they took a gourd and they covered up the hole, and he lived. He says, bring him proof from there. It was the summer, and because now it came to the winter, so now he's dead. And so anyway, we see from here that the only proof is if he goes through the whole year. And so he has to go through both seasons, which is 12 months. And so therefore, if he had gone through 12 months, that's an indication that he's not a treifa, because we were trying to say that because the same law of a treifa is like the same law of tumas oel. So the Gemara answers, Amar Bar Yaakov, halacha treifa yoledes u'mishabachas. The actual halacha is that treifa can give birth, and the treifa can even improve, and it's machukas tanaim whether or not it's 12 months or 30 days. The Gemara has a machukas tanaim about that. Okay, so we'll stop the recording here. Baruch Hashem.